Flight attendant shouts at a black teen girl. Then she makes one call and the plane is grounded. "Who do you think you are?" The flight attendant's voice slices through the cabin like a blade, sharp enough to make every passenger within earshot freeze mid-motion. Jasmine Williams, 17 years old with dreams bigger than the sky they're suspended in, feels her chest tighten as 30 pairs of eyes suddenly lock onto her face. The Delta Airlines Boeing 737 to Atlanta, originally just another routine flight on a muggy August afternoon, has become unnervingly silent except for the steady hum of engines. "I asked you a question, young lady," Barbara Winters continues, her finger pointing directly at Jasmine's face, close enough that the teenager can smell the flight attendant's cinnamon gum. "What exactly did you just say to me?" But before Jasmine can respond, her trembling fingers are already reaching for her phone, scrolling to a contact labeled Dad. As the cabin watches, divided between uncomfortable witnesses and voyeuristic spectators, no one realizes that this single call is about to change everything. Within 20 minutes, Flight 1372 will be returned to the gate. A 30-year airline veteran will be escorted off the plane. And a story that began with a simple request for orange juice will expose something far more troubling beneath the surface of American air travel. But to understand how we got here, to this moment of public humiliation and barely restrained fury at 31,000 feet, we need to go back to where it all began, just 3 hours earlier, when Jasmine Williams reluctantly agreed to fly alone for the first time in her life. If you're finding this story compelling so far, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life dramas that expose the complexities of modern America. The morning had started like any other summer day in the Williams household in Chicago's Hyde Park neighborhood. Through the kitchen window, sunlight spills across the granite countertop where Marcus Williams, a distinguished constitutional law professor at the University of Chicago, methodically packs his briefcase. His salt and pepper hair is neatly trimmed, his posture impeccable even at 6:30 a.m., habits formed during his time as a JAG officer before transitioning to civilian law. Across from him, Jasmine slumps in her chair, earbuds in, absently scrolling through TikTok while picking at a bowl of cereal. "You're sure you're okay with this?" Marcus asks, not for the first time that morning. "I can still try to change my flight." Jasmine sighs, removing one earbud. "Dad, I'm 17, not 7. I think I can manage to sit on a plane for 2 hours without supervision." Despite her confident words, there's a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. She's never flown alone before, always accompanied by either her father or her mother, Catherine, before the divorce 3 years ago. I know. Marcus glances at his watch, a vintage Omega Seamaster from 1985 that had belonged to his father. "I just don't like the idea of us taking separate flights. If your grandmother hadn't fallen—" "Dad." Jasmine cuts him off with the particular blend of affection and exasperation unique to teenagers addressing their parents. "Grandma needs you there today. I have orientation at Spelman on Monday. It makes perfect sense for you to go ahead and for me to follow tomorrow. I'll be fine." Marcus studies his daughter's face. She looks so much like her mother, the same high cheekbones, the same determined set to her jaw. But her eyes are all his, observant and analytical. She'd make a hell of a lawyer someday, though she's adamantly set on pursuing journalism instead. "All right," he concedes. "But you call me the minute you land in Atlanta, understood? And Aunt Lee will be waiting at baggage claim." "Yes, sir." Jasmine mock salutes, but then her expression softens. "Give Grandma my love. Tell her I'll be there tomorrow to help her terrorize the nursing staff." Marcus laughs, his deep voice filling the kitchen. 80-year-old Dorothy Williams, despite her recent hip fracture, has indeed been giving the rehabilitation center staff a run for their money. "I'll tell her." She's excited about you starting at her alma mater. 3 generations of Williams women at Spelman, Jasmine says with a small smile. "No pressure or anything." Marcus checks his watch again and reaches for his suit jacket draped over a kitchen chair. "I've got to head to the airport. You've got your checklist for tomorrow. Printed and on the fridge just like you taught me," Jasmine says, pointing to the neatly typed list held up by a Chicago Bulls magnet. "Passport, boarding pass, check luggage, arrived 2 hours early. That's my girl." He crosses the kitchen and drops a kiss on the top of her head. "Love you, Jazz. Love you too, Dad. Now go before you miss your flight and ruin your perfect on-time record." As Marcus heads out the door, wheeling his carry-on behind him, Jasmine returns to her phone, but her mind is elsewhere. Despite her brave front, the thought of navigating O'Hare alone tomorrow makes her stomach tighten. She's always been a bit anxious in crowds, and airports are nothing but crowds and chaos and rules she's afraid of accidentally breaking. She opens her messages and types a quick text to her best friend, Zoe. "Dad just left. I'm officially on my own until tomorrow's flight. Freedom or abandonment. Discuss." Zoe's reply comes seconds later. Freedom, come over and we'll have a pre-college send-off. Just us, some horrible movies, and enough ice cream to put us in a dairy coma. Jasmine smiles. Maybe this unexpected day alone isn't such a bad thing after all. The next morning arrives with the particular weight of significant days. Jasmine wakes before her alarm, her mind already racing through her mental checklist. She showers, dresses in comfortable travel clothes, black leggings, a vintage 1996 Chicago Bulls championship t-shirt that had been her father's, and clean white Nike Air Force Ones. Her curly hair is pulled back into a neat bun, and she applies minimal makeup, just enough to feel put together. In the kitchen, she makes toast she's too nervous to eat and instead drinks a large glass of water, remembering her father's advice about staying hydrated on flights. She double-checks her backpack. Laptop, chargers, headphones, wallet, the novel she's been meaning to finish, her favorite snacks. Her larger luggage had been packed days ago under her father's watchful eye. The man approaches packing like a military operation, complete with rolled clothes and strategic placement of heavy items. At precisely 8:15 a.m., her phone pings with a notification. Her Uber has arrived. With one last glance around the home she's about to leave, not just for a trip but for the beginning of her college life, Jasmine shoulders her backpack, grabs her suitcase handle, and steps out into the humid August morning. The Uber driver, a middle-aged man named Rajiv according to the app, helps her load her suitcase into the trunk. "O'Hare, right?" he confirms, closing the trunk with a solid thump. "Yes, please, Terminal 2, Jasmine responds, sliding into the back seat. She notices a small Ganesh figurine on the dashboard and several family photos taped beside it. "First time flying alone?" Rajiv asks, glancing at her in the rearview mirror as they pull away from the curb. Jasmine blinks in surprise. "How did you know?" he chuckles. "The way you're clutching that phone and triple-checking your backpack. Don't worry, hair looks overwhelming, but it's actually well organized. Just follow the signs and you'll be fine." "Thanks," Jasmine says, consciously relaxing her grip on her phone. "I'm heading to Atlanta for college orientation." "Ah, college, my daughter just started her second year at UIC. What will you be studying?" "Journalism at Spelman." "Excellent choice. We need good journalists these days, yes, people who tell the truth." The conversation flows easily after that, Rajiv sharing stories about his daughter's college experience and offering practical advice about navigating airport security. By the time they reach O'Hare, Jasmine's anxiety has noticeably diminished. "Good luck at Spelman," Rajiv says as he helps her unload her luggage at the departure's drop-off. "Remember, in the airport, just move with purpose and you'll be fine." "Move with purpose," Jasmine repeats. "I like that, thank you." Inside Terminal 2, Jasmine follows her father's checklist meticulously. She locates the Delta check-in counters, joins the appropriate line, and watches carefully as others ahead of her interact with the airline staff, mentally rehearsing what she'll say when it's her turn. "Next customer, please," calls a Delta agent, a woman with a neat blonde bob and expertly applied makeup. Jasmine wheels her luggage forward. "Good morning. I'm flying to Atlanta on flight 1372. The agent, her name tag reads Diane, smiles professionally. "May I see your ID and boarding pass, please?" Jasmine hands over her passport and pulls up the electronic boarding pass on her phone. Diane checks both, her fingers moving efficiently over her keyboard. "Checking one bag today?" "Yes, please. Any liquids or electronics inside?" "No, those are all in my carry-on." Diane prints a baggage tag, explains how to track the luggage through the Delta app, and attaches the tag to Jasmine's suitcase. "Your gate is B23 and boarding begins at 11:15. Security is to your right and up the escalator. Have a good flight, Ms. Williams." "Thank you," Jasmine responds, tucking her passport back into her crossbody bag and moving towards security with her newly lightened load. The security line moves with surprising efficiency. Jasmine follows the crowd, removing her shoes and placing them along with her backpack and crossbody bag into plastic bins. She walks through the metal detector without incident and reclaims her belongings on the other side. As she puts her shoes back on, she checks the time, 9:45 a.m. Her flight doesn't board for another hour and a half. With a small surge of pride at how smoothly everything has gone so far, she decides to find her gate first, then perhaps grab a proper breakfast. Gate B23 is a 20-minute walk through crowded corridors. Jasmine navigates the human traffic with growing confidence, keeping to the right except when passing slower travelers, just as her father taught her. When she reaches her gate, she's pleased to see the flight information already displayed on the monitor. Delta 1372 to Atlanta ON time. The seating area is half full, mostly with business travelers tapping on laptops or scrolling through phones. Jasmine claims an empty seat near a charging station, plugs in her phone, and texts her father. At the gate with 90 mins to spare. Security was a breeze, going to find food soon. How's Grandma? His reply comes quickly. Proud of you, Jazz. Grandma's giving the physical therapist fashion advice. Very on brand. Text before you board. Jasmine smiles and tucks her phone into her pocket. With her gate located and plenty of time to spare, she sets off in search of breakfast, eventually settling on a bagel shop where she orders an everything bagel with cream cheese and a bottled orange juice. As she eats, she people watches, a habit she's developed since deciding on journalism as her future career. She observes a harried mother trying to corral twin toddlers, an elderly couple sharing a crossword puzzle, a group of college-aged boys in matching fraternity t-shirts loudly discussing their weekend plans. By 11:00 a.m., Jasmine is back at her gate, watching as more passengers gather for the flight. She texts her father as promised, then switches her phone to airplane mode as the gate agent announces the beginning of the boarding process. We'd like to welcome our first-class passengers and Diamond Medallion members to begin boarding at this time, the agent announces over the PA system. Jasmine watches as a small group of well-dressed travelers present their boarding passes and disappear down the jetway. She checks her own boarding pass, Zone 3. She'll be among the last to board. Gradually, the gate area empties as more groups are called. When Zone 3 is finally announced, Jasmine joins the short line, boarding pass pulled up on her phone and ID in hand. Thank you, have a nice flight, the gate agent says mechanically as she scans Jasmine's boarding pass. The jetway slopes gently downward toward the waiting aircraft. At its end, a flight attendant greets passengers with a practiced smile. Welcome aboard, she says as Jasmine steps onto the plane. The cabin is nearly full, the overhead bins already crammed with carry-on luggage. Jasmine makes her way down the narrow aisle, checking seat numbers as she goes. Her ticket is for 28F, a window seat near the back of the plane. When she reaches row 28, she finds the middle and aisle seats already occupied, a middle-aged white woman with a paperback novel in the middle seat, and in the aisle seat, a heavy-set white man in his 60s wearing a golf shirt with a country club logo. Excuse me, Jasmine says politely. I'm in the window seat. The man sighs audibly but stands to let her pass. The woman does the same, though with noticeably less irritation. Jasmine squeezes past them, careful not to bump them with her backpack, and settles into her seat. She stows her backpack under the seat in front of her, buckles her seatbelt, and turns to look out the window at the ground crew loading luggage into the plane's belly. The woman beside her returns to her book. Jasmine notices it's the latest James Patterson thriller, while the man immediately puts on noise-canceling headphones and closes his eyes. Jasmine pulls out her own novel, Octavia Butler's Kindred, but finds herself too wired to focus on reading. Instead, she watches the final passengers board and listens to the flight attendants moving through their pre-flight routines. There are 4 flight attendants on this flight. 2 younger women who appear to be in their late 20s or early 30s, an older man with a salt and pepper beard, and a blonde woman who looks to be in her 50s. It's this last flight attendant who begins the safety demonstration as the plane pushes back from the gate. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Delta Airlines Flight 1372 to Atlanta, she announces, her voice carrying clearly through the cabin. My name is Barbara Winters, and I'm your lead flight attendant today. Please direct your attention to the front of the cabin as we demonstrate the safety features of this Boeing 737 aircraft. As Barbara demonstrates how to fasten a seatbelt and locate the emergency exits, Jasmine notices something odd about her demeanor. While the other flight attendants smile and make eye contact with passengers during their portions of the demonstration, Barbara's movements are mechanical, her expression neutral bordering on stern. There's an efficiency to her actions that suggests decades of experience, but none of the warmth that Jasmine associates with customer service roles. The safety demonstration concludes, the plane taxis to the runway, and soon they're accelerating down the tarmac, pressing Jasmine back into her seat as the aircraft lifts into the sky. Her stomach drops with the sudden ascent, but she finds she enjoys the sensation. Below, Chicago grows smaller, the grid pattern of streets becoming more apparent as they gain altitude, Lake Michigan stretching out like a vast blue plain to the east. Once they reach cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dings off, passengers begin to move about the cabin. The flight attendants prepare the beverage service, pushing carts up from the galley at the rear of the plane. Barbara Winters and one of the younger flight attendants, whose name tag reads Aisha, work the cart in the economy section. They start from the front of the economy cabin, slowly making their way down the aisle, row by row. Something to drink. Barbara asks the passengers in row 25, her tone brisk. "Just water, please," responds the woman in 25D. "Ginger ale for me," says the man beside her. Barbara pours the drinks without comment and hands them over, then moves to the next row. Jasmine watches this progression with mild interest, noting how Aisha engages warmly with passengers while Barbara maintains her efficient but detached approach. When they finally reach row 28, Aisha is the one who asks, "What can I get for you today?" The man in the aisle seat removes his headphones. "Tomato juice, no ice." The woman in the middle requests a Diet Coke. When Aisha turns to Jasmine, she offers a genuine smile. "And for you, miss?" "Orange juice, please," Jasmine responds. Aisha's smile falters slightly. "I'm sorry, it looks like we're out of orange juice in this cart. Let me check if we have any in the back." She turns to Barbara. "Barbara, do we have any OJ left in the galley?" Barbara, who's been arranging cups on her side of the cart, glances over. "We're out. Apple or cranberry is what we have left." Jasmine hesitates. "Actually, I saw the cart on the other aisle had some orange juice. The flight attendant was just serving it a few rows ahead." Barbara's expression changes, her mouth tightening at the corners. "If I said we're out, we're out. Apple or cranberry." Something about the woman's tone, the unmistakable edge of condescension, makes Jasmine's spine stiffen. It reminds her of her freshman math teacher, Mr. Greeley, who would speak to the black students with that same barely concealed impatience. "I'm sorry," Jasmine says, keeping her voice level and polite as her father has always taught her, "but I can literally see orange juice on the other cart. Could you please check?" The temperature between them seems to drop 10 degrees. Barbara stares at Jasmine with an expression that moves from annoyance to something harder. "Apple or cranberry?" she repeats, each word distinct and clipped. Aisha, clearly sensing the tension, interjects. "I can go check the other cart real quick, it's no problem." "No," Barbara cuts her off. "We need to keep the service moving. Apple or cranberry?" This last question is directed at Jasmine with unmistakable hostility. Jasmine feels her cheeks grow warm. She's acutely aware of the passengers around her watching this interaction, including the woman beside her who has lowered her book to observe. "Never mind," Jasmine says quietly. "Water is fine." Barbara pours water into a plastic cup with unnecessary force, some of it splashing over the sides, and thrusts it toward Jasmine without a word. Then she turns back to the cart, her body language dismissing Jasmine entirely. Aisha gives Jasmine an apologetic look before they move on to the next row. Jasmine takes a sip of her water, her hands trembling slightly with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. She feels a gentle tap on her arm and turns to find the middle-aged woman beside her leaning in. "Don't take it personally, honey," the woman whispers. "She was rude to several people. Some people just shouldn't work with the public." Jasmine nods in acknowledgement but doesn't trust herself to speak. She turns to look out the window, blinking rapidly to dispel the threat of tears. She refuses to cry over something so trivial, yet she can't shake the feeling that the interaction wasn't just about orange juice. 20 minutes pass. The beverage service concludes, and the flight attendants collect trash before returning to their stations. Jasmine tries to lose herself in her book, but finds it difficult to concentrate. The encounter with Barbara keeps replaying in her mind, along with all the similar microaggressions she's experienced throughout her young life. The security guards who follow her in stores, the teachers who seem surprised when she excels, the white friend's parents who speak to her with exaggerated slowness. Needing to use the restroom, Jasmine unbuckles her seatbelt and excuses herself past the other passengers in her row. She makes her way to the back of the plane where the lavatories are located. Both are occupied with small red occupied indicators visible on the doors. Jasmine stands in the small area near the rear galley, waiting her turn. Barbara Winters is in the galley organizing a service tray. She glances up when Jasmine appears and frowns. "The seatbelt sign is on. You need to return to your seat." Jasmine looks up at the cabin ceiling. The seatbelt sign is indeed illuminated, though she hadn't noticed when leaving her seat, and there had been no announcement. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize," Jasmine says. "I'll just use the bathroom quickly and go right back." "No," Barbara says firmly. "FAA regulations require all passengers to be seated with seatbelts fastened when the sign is on. Return to your seat immediately." At that moment, one of the lavatory doors opens and an elderly man steps out. Jasmine gestures to the now available restroom. "I'll be really quick, I promise." Barbara steps between Jasmine and the lavatory door. "I said return to your seat. Now." Something in Jasmine snaps, not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet certainty of someone who recognizes injustice when they see it. She notices Aisha watching from the other end of the galley, concern evident on her face. The man who just used it was out of his seat with the sign on. Jasmine points out, keeping her voice calm. And at least 3 other people have gotten up since the sign came on. Is there a reason you're only enforcing this rule with me? Barbara's face flushes. Are you accusing me of something? I'm just asking a question, Jasmine responds, conscious of keeping her tone respectful despite her growing frustration. Why am I being treated differently? Who do you think you are? Barbara's voice rises, cutting through the ambient noise of the cabin. Passengers in nearby rows turn to look. I asked you a question, young lady. What exactly did you just say to me? The galley falls silent except for the hum of the engines. Jasmine feels her chest tighten as she becomes aware of all the eyes now fixed on her. This isn't just about orange juice or bathroom access anymore. This is about being publicly humiliated for questioning authority. With trembling fingers, Jasmine reaches for her phone in her pocket. I'd like to call my father, please. Barbara laughs, a short, dismissive sound. This isn't school, dear. You don't get to call your daddy when you're in trouble. But Jasmine has already unlocked her phone and pulled up her recent contacts. Her father's name is at the top of the list. She presses it before Barbara can react further. Marcus Williams answers on the second ring. Jazz, everything okay? Dad, Jasmine says, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'm having a situation on the flight. The lead flight attendant is. Barbara reaches for the phone. You need to put that away right now. Cell phone use is prohibited during flight. Jasmine takes a step back, keeping the phone to her ear. Dad, she's trying to take my phone. I think this is happening because I'm black, Dad. The words hang in the air between them. Several audible gasps come from the seated passengers within earshot. Barbara's face contorts with outrage. That is absolutely false, she exclaims. How dare you make such an accusation? On the other end of the line, Marcus Williams' voice turns from concern to steel hard in an instant. Put the flight attendant on the phone, Jasmine. Barbara is already summoning the male flight attendant, her voice tight with controlled fury. Craig, we have a disruptive passenger making false accusations. I need backup. Craig, the older male flight attendant with the salt and pepper beard, approaches quickly from the front of the cabin. What's going on? Jasmine holds out her phone. My father would like to speak with a flight attendant. Craig looks uncertainly between Jasmine and Barbara, clearly trying to assess the situation. She's being disruptive and refusing to follow crew instructions, Barbara tells him, and now she's making discriminatory accusations. I've asked repeatedly why I'm being treated differently from other passengers, Jasmine says, her voice beginning to waver despite her efforts to remain composed. The only difference I can see is the color of my skin. Craig, looking increasingly uncomfortable, takes the phone from Jasmine. Hello, this is Craig Bennett, senior flight attendant on Delta 1372. Who am I speaking with? As Craig listens to Marcus, his expression grows increasingly serious. He turns slightly away from Barbara, lowering his voice. I understand your concern, sir. Yes, I see. After a moment, he says, I'll need to involve the captain in this situation. Can I take your contact information and have him call you directly? When Craig ends the call, he hands the phone back to Jasmine. Please return to your seat for now, he says, his tone professional but considerably warmer than Barbara's. The captain will be in touch with your father and will address this situation properly. Barbara stares at Craig in disbelief. You can't be serious. She was completely out of line. We need to follow protocol, Barbara, Craig says quietly. If a passenger is alleging discriminatory treatment, we have to document and investigate properly. This is ridiculous, Barbara hisses. She's just a teenager trying to get away with breaking the rules. Aisha, who has been watching silently, finally speaks up. Barbara, I did see several other passengers use the lavatory after the seatbelt sign came on. No one else was stopped. The look Barbara gives Aisha could freeze running water. Without another word, she turns and strides toward the front of the aircraft, presumably to speak with the captain. Craig turns to Jasmine. Please return to your seat for now. I apologize for any distress this situation has caused you. Jasmine nods, no longer trusting her voice, and makes her way back to row 28. As she slides past her row mates to the window seat, she notices many passengers watching her, their expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity to outright discomfort. The woman in the middle seat leans over once Jasmine is settled. Are you okay, honey? That sounded intense. Jasmine nods, not trusting herself to speak without her voice breaking. She turns to look out the window, trying to gather her composure as her phone buzzes with a text from her father. The captain is calling me. Stay calm, be respectful, but stand your ground. I'm proud of you for speaking up. I love you. In the cockpit, Captain Thomas Reynolds is frowning as he listens to Barbara Winter's version of events. A 25-year veteran with Delta, Reynolds has seen his share of in-flight incidents, but something about this one feels off from the start. So you're saying the passenger became belligerent when you enforced the seatbelt sign policy? he asks, his weathered face skeptical beneath his captain's hat. Absolutely, Barbara affirms. And then she started making it about race, if you can believe it. Playing the race card when she got caught breaking the rules. Reynolds' frown deepens. And were other passengers using the lavatory at the same time? Barbara hesitates just long enough for Reynolds to notice. That's not the point. She was directly defiant when instructed to return to her seat. First Officer Michael Chen, seated beside Reynolds, exchanges a glance with his captain. They've both worked with Barbara before, and while she's technically proficient, her customer service skills have been the subject of previous complaints. I think I should speak with the other flight attendants and the passenger before making any decisions, Reynolds says carefully. Mike, take the controls. I'll go back and assess the situation. As Reynolds unbuckles his harness and stands, Barbara's expression tightens. Tom, this is a clear case of passenger noncompliance. We should be discussing diversion options or having law enforcement meet the flight in Atlanta. Reynolds fixes Barbara with a steady gaze. Let me handle this, Barbara. Please return to your station. In the main cabin, news of the confrontation has spread through whispers and meaningful glances. Passengers in rows near the rear galley recount what they witnessed to those seated farther forward. Phones are discreetly pulled out, social media updates composed but not yet sent due to airplane mode. Jasmine sits rigidly in her seat, eyes fixed on the clouds outside her window, trying to ignore the sensation of being watched. Her phone, now back in airplane mode, displays her father's last message like a talisman of support. A gentle tap on her shoulder makes her turn. It's Craig, the male flight attendant. The captain would like to speak with you privately, he says quietly. Would you come with me, please? Jasmine nods and follows Craig to a small area at the front of the cabin where the captain is waiting. Captain Reynolds is a tall man with kind eyes and the confident bearing of someone used to command. Ms. Williams, I'm Captain Reynolds, he says, extending his hand. I've just spoken with your father on the phone. He's quite concerned about the situation. Yes, sir, Jasmine responds, shaking his hand firmly as her father taught her. I'd like to hear your version of events if you don't mind, Reynolds says, gesturing to a jump seat where they can speak with some privacy. Jasmine takes a deep breath and recounts everything, starting with the orange juice incident and continuing through the confrontation at the lavatory. She's careful to stick to facts rather than interpretations, just as she's learned in her high school journalism class. And you believe you were treated differently because of your race? Reynolds asks when she finishes, his tone neutral but not dismissive. I can't know for certain what was in her mind, Jasmine answers carefully. But I know what I observed. Other passengers were served orange juice. Other passengers used the bathroom while the seatbelt sign was on. I was the only one confronted and humiliated publicly. Reynolds nods thoughtfully. Thank you for your candor, Ms. Williams. I'm going to speak with the other flight attendants and some of the passengers who witnessed the interactions. In the meantime, I've arranged for you to sit in an empty seat in first class for the remainder of the flight, away from this situation. Thank you, Jasmine says, surprised by this accommodation. But what happens next? That depends on what I find in my investigation, Reynolds replies. Your father has made it clear he intends to file a formal complaint with Delta, and he has every right to do so. For now, let's focus on getting everyone to Atlanta safely and comfortably. Craig escorts Jasmine to first class, where she's seated in 4A, a window seat with no one beside her. As she settles in, she notices Barbara watching from the galley, her expression unreadable. Meanwhile, Captain Reynolds conducts his investigation methodically, speaking with Aisha and several passengers who witnessed the interactions. A consistent picture emerges. Barbara singled out Jasmine in a way that made multiple observers uncomfortable, regardless of their own racial backgrounds. In the cockpit, Reynolds faces a difficult decision. After conferring with Delta's ground operations via radio, he returns to the main cabin and approaches Barbara, who is restocking a service cart. Barbara, we need to talk, he says quietly. Based on my conversations with the crew and passengers, I'm concerned about what happened with Ms. Williams. Barbara straightens, her face flushing. Tom, you can't be serious. Are you taking the word of a teenager over a 30-year flight attendant? I'm taking the word of multiple witnesses, including our own crew members, Reynolds replies evenly. Delta has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. Discrimination? Barbara's voice rises incredulously. This is absolutely ridiculous. I've never discriminated against anyone in my life. Several nearby passengers turn to look at the confrontation. Reynolds lowers his voice. Barbara, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice down. This isn't a discussion for the entire cabin. But Barbara has reached her breaking point. No, let's have this discussion right here. You're taking the side of someone playing the race card to get special treatment. It's pathetic, and you know it. The cabin falls silent as passengers register what they're witnessing. Reynolds' expression hardens. "That's enough, Barbara. Please come with me to the galley." In the forward galley, shielded somewhat from passenger view, Reynolds delivers his decision. "We're returning to O'Hare. Delta management will meet the flight and you'll be removed from duty pending investigation." "You can't do this," Barbara protests, but her voice has lost its certainty. "The decision is made," Reynolds states firmly. "I've already advised air traffic control of our return. Please prepare the cabin for arrival." In the first-class cabin, Jasmine feels the aircraft bank into a turn. Minutes later, Captain Reynolds' voice comes over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. Due to an operational issue, we will be returning to Chicago O'Hare Airport. We expect to be on the ground in approximately 25 minutes. At this time, I ask that all flight attendants prepare the cabin for arrival and all passengers remain seated with seatbelts fastened. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding." A murmur runs through the cabin as passengers speculate about the reason for the return. In seat 4A, Jasmine feels a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication that her concerns were taken seriously, anxiety about the attention she's receiving, and a gnawing guilt that an entire plane full of people will be delayed because of an incident involving her. Her phone buzzes with a text, and she realizes the plane has descended enough to restore cell service. It's from her father. The captain just called again. "They're returning to O'Hare. I'm driving back to meet you. You did nothing wrong, Jazz. I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself with dignity." Tears well in Jasmine's eyes at her father's words. She blinks them away as Aisha approaches her seat. "We'll be landing soon," Aisha says gently. "Are you doing okay?" Jasmine nods. "Yes, thank you. I'm sorry about all this." Aisha shakes her head. "You have nothing to apologize for. This shouldn't have happened to you." She hesitates, then adds in a lower voice, "For what it's worth, you're not the first passenger to have issues with Barbara. Some of us have tried to report her behavior before, but—" She trails off with a meaningful look. As the plane descends toward O'Hare, Jasmine watches Chicago reappear through breaks in the clouds. The city looks different somehow, as though in the span of an hour, her relationship with the world has fundamentally shifted. The landing is smooth, and as the aircraft taxis to the gate, Captain Reynolds makes another announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived back at Chicago O'Hare. We apologize for the inconvenience of this return. Delta representatives will meet us at the gate with information about rebooking options for your journey to Atlanta. We ask that you remain seated until we reach the gate and the fasten seatbelt sign has been turned off. Thank you for your patience and understanding during this situation." When the aircraft reaches the gate and the seatbelt sign dings off, passengers begin gathering their belongings. As Jasmine stands to retrieve her backpack from the overhead bin, she becomes aware of several passengers watching her. One woman, a well-dressed black woman in her 60s who had been seated across the aisle in first class, catches her eye. "You handled yourself with grace, young lady," the woman says with a knowing nod. Not everyone would have had the courage to speak up. Before Jasmine can respond, the aircraft door opens and several Delta representatives in suits board the plane. They speak briefly with Captain Reynolds, then approach Barbara, who has been standing rigidly by her jump seat. After a brief, tense conversation, Barbara collects her personal belongings and exits the aircraft, escorted by one of the Delta representatives. Another representative approaches Jasmine. "Ms. Williams." "I'm Sophia Rodriguez, Delta's Director of Customer Experience for O'Hare. Would you come with me, please? Your father is waiting in our executive lounge." As Jasmine follows Ms. Rodriguez off the plane and through the terminal, she notices several passengers from the flight watching her go, their expressions ranging from supportive to curious to, in a few cases, resentful. She keeps her head high, moving with the purpose Rajiv had advised her about just hours earlier, though it feels like days have passed since that morning Uber ride. In the executive lounge, Marcus Williams is pacing, his normally composed demeanor betrayed by the tension visible in his shoulders. When he sees Jasmine, he crosses the room in 4 long strides and engulfs her in a hug. "Are you okay?" he asks, holding her at arm's length to examine her face. "I'm fine, Dad," Jasmine assures him, though the relief of seeing him makes her voice waver. "Really?" Marcus turns to Ms. Rodriguez, who has been waiting discreetly nearby. "I want a full accounting of what happened on that flight, and I want to know exactly what Delta plans to do about it." "Of course, Professor Williams," Rodriguez responds. "Delta takes allegations of discriminatory treatment extremely seriously. The flight attendant in question has been removed from duty pending a full investigation. We'd like to take your statements separately to establish a complete record of the incidents." For the next hour, Jasmine and Marcus give detailed accounts of what transpired on the flight and over the phone. Delta representatives are professional and thorough, asking clarifying questions without being defensive or dismissive. "What happens now?" Marcus asks when the statements are complete. "We'll conduct a full investigation, including interviews with other passengers and crew members," Rodriguez explains. "Based on Captain Reynolds' initial report, we have enough concern to justify immediate administrative leave for Ms. Winters. We'd like to offer you both first-class tickets on our next flight to Atlanta, which departs in 3 hours, along with our sincere apologies for this experience." Marcus looks at Jasmine. "It's your call, Jazz. We can fly out today, or we can look at other options." Jasmine considers for a moment. Part of her wants to put this whole experience behind her and just get to Atlanta another way. But a stronger part, the part that decided on journalism as a career path, the part that believes in confronting problems rather than avoiding them, makes her decision clear. "I'll take the next flight," she says firmly. "I'm not going to let this change my plans." Marcus smiles, a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. "Then we'll both be on that flight." "Actually," Jasmine says, surprising herself with her own certainty, "I still want to fly alone." Seeing her father's worried expression, she adds, "I need to do this, Dad. I can't let what happened make me afraid." After a moment, Marcus nods. "All right, but I'm driving back to Atlanta tonight. I'll see you when you land." As they leave the executive lounge, Jasmine notices a small crowd gathered near a television in the terminal. Breaking news chyrons scroll across the bottom of the screen, and she catches a glimpse of a familiar scene, the Delta aircraft she had just been on. "Delta flight returns to Chicago after discrimination allegation," reads the caption. "Oh no," Jasmine murmurs, freezing in place. Marcus follows her gaze to the television and puts a protective arm around her shoulders. "Was bound to get out," he says quietly. "These things always do. But I didn't want all this attention," Jasmine protests. "I just wanted to be treated fairly." "I know, Jazz, but sometimes standing up for what's right puts you in the spotlight whether you want it or not." As they watch, the news segment cuts to footage of Barbara Winters being escorted through the terminal, her face rigid with anger as she ignores reporters' questions. Then, to Jasmine's horror, her own name appears on the screen. Sources identify the passenger as Jasmine Williams, 17, who was traveling alone to Atlanta for college orientation. Marcus's phone begins to ring incessantly. As a prominent law professor with media connections, he's an easy contact for journalists to track down. He silences the phone and guides Jasmine toward the terminal exit. "Let's get out of here," he says. "We'll go home, regroup, and come back for your flight later." In the car, Jasmine stares out the window as her father navigates through Chicago traffic. Her phone has all started buzzing with notifications, texts from friends who have seen the news, social media alerts as her name trends on various platforms. "Dad," she says suddenly, "what if she wasn't being racist? What if I misjudged the situation? What if—" "Stop," Marcus says gently but firmly. "You didn't accuse her of anything that wasn't supported by what you observed. You pointed out a pattern of differential treatment. That's not jumping to conclusions, that's critical thinking. But now her career might be ruined, and there's all this media attention and—" "Jasmine," Marcus's voice takes on the professor tone he rarely uses with her. "You are not responsible for the consequences of someone else's actions. If Barbara Winters treated you differently because of your race, that's on her, not you. If the media is turning this into a spectacle, that's on them." Jasmine falls silent, unconvinced but unwilling to argue further. When they arrive home, the house feels different somehow, less of a sanctuary than it had been that morning. "I'm going to make some calls," Marcus says, heading for his study. "Try to get ahead of this story before it gets out of control. Why don't you rest for a bit? We'll head back to the airport in a couple of hours." Left alone, Jasmine retreats to her bedroom and finally allows herself to look at her phone. There are dozens of messages from friends, most supportive but some uncomfortably probing for details. Social media is worse. Her name is trending in Chicago, with opinions already sharply divided between those condemning Delta and those questioning her account. One tweet in particular makes her stomach clench. "Another privileged kid playing the race card when she doesn't get her way. Father's a big-shot professor. Coincidence? Fake outrage." She puts the phone down, suddenly exhausted. Lying back on her bed, she stares at the ceiling, trying to process everything that's happened in the span of a few hours. What was supposed to be a simple flight to college orientation has somehow become a public referendum on race relations in America. A soft knock on her door interrupts her thoughts. "Jazz, can I come in?" her father calls. "Yeah," she responds, sitting up as Marcus enters and sits beside her on the bed. "How are you holding up?" he asks. Jasmine shrugs. "I don't know. It all feels surreal. I keep replaying everything in my mind, wondering if I overreacted." Marcus takes her hand. "I want to show you something." He holds out his phone, displaying an email he's just received. This is from Aisha Johnson, the flight attendant who was working with Barbara. She reached out to Delta's HR to provide her statement, and she copied me. Jasmine takes the phone and reads, "To whom it may concern, I am writing to provide my account of the incidents involving Barbara Winters and passenger Jasmine Williams on Delta Flight 1372 today. I witnessed Ms. Winters deny Jasmine orange juice despite it being available, speak to her in a condescending manner unlike her interactions with other passengers, and selectively enforce the seatbelt sign policy against her while allowing other passengers to use the lavatory without comment. In my 8 years with Delta, I have observed Ms. Winters demonstrate similar patterns of behavior toward passengers of color on multiple occasions, though previous complaints have not resulted in significant action. I am providing this statement voluntarily because I believe Jasmine Williams was treated unfairly and that Delta must address this pattern of behavior. Sincerely, Aisha Johnson, flight attendant, Delta Airlines." Jasmine looks up from the phone, her eyes wide. "She sent this voluntarily." Marcus nods. "And she's not the only one. 3 passengers have already contacted Delta to corroborate your account. The woman across from you in first class, Elaine Harmon, she's a federal judge, was particularly adamant." "So, I wasn't imagining things?" "No, Jazz, you weren't, and that's an important lesson to remember. Sometimes people will try to make you doubt your own experiences. They'll suggest you're overreacting or misinterpreting. Don't let them." If you're finding this story as powerful as we do, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share where you're watching from in the comments. Your support helps us bring more stories like Jasmine's to light. 3 hours later, Jasmine is back at O'Hare, this time in the first-class lounge with her father. Delta has arranged for a customer service representative to personally escort her to her gate when it's time to board, shielding her from the reporters who have gathered in the terminal following the breaking news story. "Are you sure you still want to fly alone?" Marcus asks for the 3rd time. "No one would think less of you if you wanted me to come along." "I'm sure," Jasmine says with more confidence than she feels. "This is something I need to do." When it's time to board, the Delta representative, a young black woman named Tanya, leads Jasmine through a side entrance to avoid the main terminal. "The captain would like to speak with you before the other passengers board," Tanya explains as they walk down the jetway. To Jasmine's surprise, Captain Reynolds is waiting at the aircraft door. "Ms. Williams," he greets her with a handshake. "I wanted to personally welcome you aboard and assure you that we've assembled a crew that will ensure you have a safe and comfortable flight to Atlanta." "Thank you, Captain Reynolds," Jasmine responds, touched by his consideration. "And thank you for believing me earlier today." Reynolds' expression turns serious. "There was nothing to believe or not believe, Ms. Williams. I observed a pattern of behavior and took appropriate action. That's what leadership requires." He gestures toward the first-class cabin. "Your seat is 2A if you need anything during the flight, anything at all. Please don't hesitate to ask." As Jasmine settles into her first-class seat, she notices a familiar face among the flight attendants preparing the cabin. Aisha, who gives her a warm smile and a discreet thumbs-up as she passes. The flight to Atlanta proceeds without incident. Jasmine is treated with the same professional courtesy as every other passenger, no more and no less. When they land at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, she feels a sense of accomplishment that goes far beyond simply completing her first solo flight. Her Aunt Lee is waiting at baggage claim, along with her father who, true to his word, drove the 11 hours from Chicago to be there when she landed. As Jasmine embraces them both, she knows that this day, which began with such ordinary anxieties about traveling alone, has changed her in ways she's only beginning to understand. Over the next week, as Jasmine attends orientation at Spelman College, the story of Flight 1372 continues to unfold in the media. Barbara Winters gives an interview to a sympathetic host on a conservative news channel, depicting herself as the victim of cancel culture and political correctness run amok. Delta issues a public statement reaffirming their commitment to equity and inclusion, announcing a review of their training procedures without commenting specifically on personnel matters. Social media remains divided, with hashtags supporting both Jasmine and Barbara trending intermittently. Opinion pieces appear in major newspapers, using the incident as a launching point for broader discussions about race in America. Through it all, Jasmine tries to focus on her orientation, on making new friends, on the excitement of beginning her college journey. But on her 3rd night at Spelman, she finds herself sitting alone in her temporary dorm room, overwhelmed by the attention and second-guessing her actions all over again. A knock on her door reveals her faculty advisor, Dr. Alina Jackson, a distinguished professor of journalism with a reputation for tough love and unwavering principles. "May I come in, Ms. Williams?" Dr. Jackson asks. At Jasmine's nod, she enters and takes a seat in the desk chair while Jasmine perches on the edge of her bed. "I wanted to check on you," Dr. Jackson says. "I imagine all this attention has been rather overwhelming." "It has," Jasmine admits. "I never wanted to become a news story. I just wanted to be treated fairly." Dr. Jackson studies her thoughtfully. "You know, when I was about your age, this would have been 1978, I was the only black student in my graduate journalism program at Columbia. One professor consistently gave me lower grades than my white classmates for comparable work. When I finally confronted him, he accused me of playing the race card." "What did you do?" Jasmine asks. "I gathered evidence. I collected papers with similar grades but different feedback. I documented patterns. And then I went to the department chair." Dr. Jackson smiles slightly at the memory. "He initially dismissed my concerns, but I persisted. Eventually, an investigation revealed that this professor had a history of grading minority students more harshly. Did things change? Gradually. The professor was required to use blind grading. My grades improved. But more importantly, I learned that speaking truth to power requires both courage and evidence." Dr. Jackson leans forward. "From what I've read about your experience, you did exactly that. You observed a pattern, you spoke up respectfully, and you didn't back down when challenged. But now everything's so complicated," Jasmine says. "People are taking sides, making assumptions. Some are even sending me hateful messages." "Welcome to journalism in the digital age," Dr. Jackson says dryly. "The truth rarely fits into a tweet and nuance doesn't generate clicks." She stands, preparing to leave. "But here's what I know after 40 years in this field. The truth matters even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Remember that, Ms. Williams." After Dr. Jackson leaves, Jasmine sits for a long time, thinking about truth and courage and the responsibility that comes with both. Then she opens her laptop and begins to write, not a tweet or a social media post, but a careful, detailed account of what happened on Flight 1372, neither sensationalized nor minimized, just the truth as she experienced it. The next morning, Jasmine attends her first official orientation session in Spelman's historic Sisters Chapel. The imposing brick building with its soaring windows has hosted generations of young black women at the start of their college journeys. As Jasmine finds a seat among hundreds of other freshmen, she feels both the weight and the support of this legacy. President Marion Carter, a dignified woman with silver-streaked locks and a commanding presence, takes the podium. She welcomes the class of 2025 with warmth and wisdom, speaking of Spelman's 144-year history of educating black women to be leaders and change-makers. "At Spelman," President Carter says, her voice resonating through the chapel, "we don't just prepare you for the world as it is, we prepare you to create the world as it should be. That means recognizing injustice when you see it, standing firm in your truth, and using your voice to affect change." Jasmine shifts in her seat, wondering if these words are somehow meant specifically for her. Has news of her experience reached the college administration? The thought makes her uncomfortable. She doesn't want special attention or to be seen as someone looking for trouble. After the welcome address, students break into smaller groups for campus tour and departmental orientations. Jasmine's journalism cohort consists of 12 freshmen, guided by a senior named Kendra who leads them to the Camille Olivia Hanks Cosby Academic Center, where the Department of Communications is housed. As they walk across the meticulously maintained campus, with its mix of historic buildings and modern facilities, Kendra points out landmarks and shares bits of Spelman lore. Jasmine tries to focus, but she notices other students in the group glancing at her and whispering. Her story has followed her here, it seems. The journalism department chair, Dr. William Thornton, greets them in a seminar room lined with framed front pages of historic newspapers. He's a tall man with a salt and pepper beard, wire-rimmed glasses, and a bow tie, the very picture of an academic. "Welcome to the Department of Communications," he begins. "At Spelman, we believe that journalism is more than just reporting facts. It's about bearing witness, giving voice to the voiceless, and holding power accountable." As Dr. Thornton outlines the curriculum and expectations, Jasmine feels a growing sense of belonging. This is why she chose journalism, not for attention or controversy, but because she believes in the power of truthful storytelling to create change. When the orientation session ends, Dr. Thornton asks Jasmine to stay behind. Her heart sinks. Here it comes, the uncomfortable acknowledgement of her newfound notoriety. "Ms. Williams," Dr. Thornton says when they're alone, "Dr. Jackson told me about your experience on that Delta flight." Jasmine nods, unsure what to say. "I want you to know that while we won't treat you any differently from other students, we understand that you're dealing with unusual circumstances. If the media attention becomes disruptive to your studies, please let us know. We can help you navigate it. Thank you, Jasmine says, relieved by his matter-of-fact approach. I just want to focus on being a regular student. Dr. Thornton smiles. Well, I'm afraid regular isn't really what we aim for at Spellman. But I understand the sentiment. He pauses, considering his next words. You know what happened to you being thrust into the spotlight for standing up against discrimination? It's actually a textbook case study for our media ethics course. If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to add your experience to our curriculum. Not this semester, of course, but perhaps in the spring. Jasmine is taken aback. You want to use my story as a teaching tool. Only with your permission and only after enough time has passed for you to process it fully, Dr. Thornton assures her. Think about it. No pressure either way. As Jasmine leaves the Cosby Center, she's struck by the irony. Her experience, which she never wanted to be public, might actually serve an educational purpose. Perhaps some good could come from it after all. The rest of orientation week passes in a blur of campus tour, informational sessions, and social events designed to help freshmen find their footing. Jasmine meets her roommate, Tasha Jones, a biology major from Los Angeles with an infectious laugh, and a collection of plants she insists on bringing to their dorm room. They click immediately, bonding over a shared love of 90s R&B and midnight snacks. By Sunday evening, the day before classes begin, Jasmine has almost managed to put the flight incident out of her mind. She's having dinner with her father, grandmother, and Aunt Lee at Mary Mac's Tea Room, a historic Atlanta restaurant known for its Southern comfort food. Dorothy Williams, despite her recent hip surgery, insisted on leaving the rehabilitation center for the evening to celebrate her granddaughter's college milestone. She sits regally at the table, her silver hair styled impeccably, her cane propped against her chair. So, Dorothy says as they wait for their entrees, are we going to talk about the elephant in the room, or are we going to pretend my granddaughter didn't make national news by standing up to that flight attendant? Marcus sighs. Mom, we agreed to give Jazz a break from that topic tonight. Dorothy waves off his concern. Oh, please, the girl deserves to be celebrated, not coddled. I raised you better than that, Marcus. Jasmine can't help but smile. Her grandmother has never been one to shy away from difficult conversations. It's okay, Dad. I don't mind talking about it with family. Well, I for one am bursting with pride, Dorothy declares. When I was your age, we couldn't even sit at the front of the bus, let alone fly first class. And if someone treated us unfairly, we certainly couldn't call our fathers on cell phones or have captains intervene on our behalf. It's a different world, Mama, Aunt Lee interjects, but not as different as we'd like to think. Exactly my point, Dorothy says, reaching for Jasmine's hand across the table. What happened to you, child, is just a more subtle version of what we faced. The difference is you had tools we didn't have, technology, allies in positions of authority, a father with legal knowledge, and you used them. That's progress. Jasmine squeezes her grandmother's hand, moved by her perspective. I never thought of it that way. Well, you should, Dorothy continues. Every generation builds on the work of the one before. Your great-grandmother marched for the right to vote. I sat at lunch counters and registered voters during Freedom Summer. Your father represented civil rights cases when it cost him partnerships at fancy law firms. And now you're using social media and technology to document discrimination in real time. It's all part of the same struggle. The waitress arrives with their food, fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, and cornbread. As they eat, the conversation shifts to lighter topics. Campus housing, Jasmine's class schedule, Dorothy's ongoing battle with her physical therapist. The man thinks I'm made of glass, Marcus. Yesterday he wouldn't let me walk to the bathroom without that ridiculous walker. But Jasmine keeps thinking about her grandmother's words. Perhaps what happened on that flight wasn't just an isolated incident or a personal humiliation. Perhaps it was part of something larger, a continuum of resistance against injustice, adapted for a new era. The next morning, as Jasmine prepares for her first day of classes, she receives an email notification. The subject line reads, Your account of Flight 1372, The Atlantic. With trembling fingers, she opens it to find a message from Evelyn Marsh, a senior editor at The Atlantic. Dear Ms. Williams, your written account of your experience on Delta Flight 1372 was forwarded to me by Dr. Alina Jackson, who thought I might be interested. She was right. Your clarity, thoughtfulness, and nuance in describing a complex situation are remarkable, especially for someone your age. I'd like to discuss the possibility of publishing your piece as part of a series we're developing on modern manifestations of racial bias and the evolving ways people respond to them. If you're interested, please contact me at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Evelyn Marsh, Senior Editor, The Atlantic. Jasmine stares at the screen in disbelief. Dr. Jackson shared her writing with The Atlantic. Without asking, she's simultaneously flattered and alarmed. Publishing her account would mean embracing the public role she's been trying to avoid. It would mean permanently attaching her name to this incident, becoming a voice in a national conversation she never asked to join. She forwards the email to her father with a simple message. "What do I do?" His response comes within minutes. "This is your decision, Jazz, but remember what I've always told you. If you don't tell your own story, someone else will tell it for you. Either way, I support whatever you choose." As she walks to her first class, Introduction to Mass Communications with Dr. Jackson, fittingly enough, Jasmine weighs her options. Publishing would mean more attention, more scrutiny, possibly more criticism. But it would also mean controlling her own narrative, using her voice on her own terms. She slips into the classroom and takes a seat in the second row, still undecided. Dr. Jackson enters moments later, surveying the room with keen eyes that miss nothing. When her gaze lands on Jasmine, there's a flicker of acknowledgement but no special treatment. "Welcome to Introduction to Mass Communications," Dr. Jackson begins. "In this course, we will explore the evolving landscape of media and its impact on society. But before we dive into the syllabus, I want to share a fundamental truth about journalism." She pauses, making eye contact with each student in turn. "The most powerful stories are not those with the loudest headlines or the most sensational details. The most powerful stories are those that reveal truth through authentic human experience." Jasmine feels a certainty settle over her. She pulls out her phone, hidden beneath her desk, and quickly types a response to Evelyn Marsh. "I'm interested in discussing publication. When would be a good time to talk?" 3 months later, as the fall semester at Spelman is in full swing, Jasmine receives an email from Delta Airlines. The investigation into the incident has concluded. While the specifics regarding Barbara Winters remain confidential due to personnel privacy policies, the email informs Jasmine that Delta has implemented enhanced diversity and inclusion training for all flight crews and has established a more robust reporting system for incidents of potential discrimination. The media attention has largely faded as news cycles moved on to fresher controversies. But the experience has left its mark on Jasmine, shaping her approach to her journalism studies and strengthening her commitment to telling stories that illuminate the complex realities of race in America. Her article in The Atlantic, titled "What Happened on Flight 1372, received widespread acclaim for its thoughtful exploration of the incident without resorting to simplistic narratives or accusatory language. It sparked meaningful discussions about implicit bias, corporate responsibility, and the power of documentation in the digital age. Barbara Winters, after a period of administrative leave, resigned from Delta. In her resignation statement, she maintained that her actions were misinterpreted, but acknowledged the need for greater sensitivity in today's complex social environment. She now runs a consulting business helping companies navigate what she calls the minefield of identity politics in the workplace. Captain Reynolds received a commendation from Delta for his handling of the situation. He occasionally uses the incident as a teaching example in the leadership courses he teaches for new pilots, emphasizing the importance of thorough investigation and decisive action. Aisha Johnson was promoted to lead flight attendant and now serves on Delta's newly formed Inclusion Advisory Council, helping to shape policies and training programs aimed at preventing similar incidents. On a crisp October evening, as Jasmine sits in the campus library working on an assignment for Dr. Jackson's Introduction to Journalism class, her phone buzzes with a text from her father. "Just landed in Atlanta for Parents' Weekend. Guess what? Delta flight attendant recognized my name and asked if I was related to you. Said your story led to real changes in how they handle these situations. You made a difference, Jazz. Always remember that." Jasmine smiles as she reads the message, feeling a sense of validation that no news story or social media trend could provide. She had spoken her truth, and it had mattered. In the end, that was what journalism and justice was all about. What started as a simple request for orange juice had revealed something much deeper about American society, about courage, about the small moments that sometimes lead to significant change. And as Jasmine returns to her assignment, an article about student activism on campus, she carries with her the knowledge that one voice, raised at the right moment and in the right way, can indeed make a difference. The spring semester brings new challenges and opportunities. Jasmine's article has opened doors, She receives an invitation to speak at a media ethics conference, and several news organizations offer her summer internships. She accepts a position with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, drawn by their commitment to local reporting and their coverage of racial justice issues in the South. One Friday afternoon in April, Jasmine is hurrying across campus to meet Tasha for coffee when she spots a familiar face near the student center, a tall man with kind eyes and the confident bearing of an airline captain. "Captain Reynolds?" she calls, surprised. He turns and smiles in recognition. "Ms. Williams, I thought that might be you." "What are you doing at Spelman?" Jasmine asks, genuinely puzzled. "My daughter is considering transferring here next year," he explains. "We're here for a campus tour." He gestures to a young woman standing nearby examining a campus map. "That's wonderful," Jasmine says. "Spelman is an amazing school." Reynolds nods. "So I've heard." He pauses, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I wanted to thank you, actually. What happened on that flight?" It led to some important changes at Delta. Not just procedural changes, but real conversations about how we interact with passengers, how we recognize and address bias. "I'm glad something positive came from it," Jasmine says. "More than you know," Reynolds assures her. "By the way, I read your article in The Atlantic. It was remarkably fair, even to Barbara. Not everyone would have been so balanced in their account." Jasmine shrugs. "I just told the truth as I experienced it." "That's what journalists are supposed to do, right?" Reynolds smiles. "Indeed. Well, I should get back to our tour. Good luck with your studies, Ms. Williams. Something tells me we'll be reading your byline for years to come." As Captain Reynolds walks away to rejoin his daughter, Jasmine feels a sense of closure. The incident that once seemed so defining has become just one chapter in her story, an important one, certainly, but not the only one. That evening, as she works on an essay for her African American literature class, analyzing Zora Neale Hurston's How It Feels to Be Colored Me, Jasmine finds herself drawn to Hurston's words. "I do not belong to the sobbing school of Negrohood who hold that nature somehow has given them a low-down, dirty deal. No, I do not weep at the world. I am too busy sharpening my oyster knife." Jasmine thinks about her grandmother, who registered voters during Freedom Summer despite the dangers. She thinks about her father, who chose civil rights law over more lucrative specialties. She thinks about Dr. Jackson, fighting for fair treatment in academia when there were few allies to be found. And she thinks about herself, making that fateful call from 31,000 feet, not knowing where it would lead but certain that silence was not an option. They are all, in their own ways, sharpening their oyster knives, using the tools of their time to pry open spaces for truth and justice. The work continues, generation after generation, adapting to new circumstances but pursuing the same essential goals. As the semester progresses, Jasmine finds her voice as a writer, developing a distinctive style that combines factual precision with empathetic storytelling. Her professors note her talent for finding the human element in complex issues, for making abstract concepts concrete through individual experiences. In May, as the school year draws to a close, Dr. Jackson nominates Jasmine for a prestigious summer journalism program at the Poynter Institute. The application requires a personal statement addressing the question, "Why do you want to be a journalist?" Jasmine sits in her dorm room, fingers poised over her keyboard, reflecting on everything that has brought her to this moment. She begins to type, "I want to be a journalist because I believe in the power of truth to create change." Not truth as an abstract concept or a political weapon, but truth as lived experience, messy, complicated, and deeply human. I learned this lesson not in a classroom, but at 31,000 feet, when a request for orange juice led to a confrontation that changed the trajectory of my life. In that moment, I discovered that bearing witness, observing carefully, documenting accurately, and speaking honestly, can transform individual experience into collective understanding. That's what journalism at its best can do. It can take one person's story and use it to illuminate larger patterns, systems, and possibilities. I want to tell stories that matter, stories that might otherwise go untold. I want to shine light into corners where power operates unchecked. I want to amplify voices that struggle to be heard. Not because I believe journalism alone can solve society's problems, but because I know that without accurate information and authentic storytelling, we cannot even begin to address them. The path that led me to journalism began long before I was born, in the courage of ancestors who insisted on their humanity when the world denied it. It continues through the work of those who use whatever tools they have, whether legal briefs, protest marches, classroom lectures, or news articles, to bend the long arc of history toward justice. I want to be a journalist because I believe words have power. They can obscure truth or reveal it, divide communities or unite them, rationalize injustice or challenge it. I choose to use words in service of truth, community, and justice, not because it's easy or comfortable, but because it's necessary. As Jasmine reads over her statement, she realizes how far she's come from that anxious teenager preparing for her first solo flight. The experience that once seemed like a traumatic interruption to her carefully planned journey has instead become a defining moment, a clarification of purpose. She's no longer just a student aspiring to be a journalist. She's already begun the work of bearing witness, speaking truth, and creating change. Whatever comes next, the Pointer Program, her internship at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, her continued studies at Spelman, she'll approach it with the same commitment to truth and justice that guided her on Flight 1372. As she submits her application, Jasmine thinks of something her grandmother said during a recent phone call. "Child, sometimes the most important journeys aren't about where you're going, but about what you're willing to stand for along the way." Flight 1372 never reached its intended destination. But for Jasmine Williams, the journey continues, with greater purpose and clarity than ever before. If this story moved you or made you think differently about everyday interactions, please subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these important conversations to light.